The battlefield was silent. Thousands of Exoloth soldiers stood frozen, gripping their weapons, their bodies trembling despite the heavy armor they wore. It was not because of the cold or exhaustion, it was fear. Fear of the human standing in front of them. He was alone, unarmed, wounded. Yet, he was smiling. A deep, unsettling smile that sent a chill through the alien ranks. They had shot him 100 times. They had seen him fall. They had confirmed his death. And yet, there he was, standing again, his body covered in blood, both his and theirs. The Exoloth were the most feared warriors in the galaxy, towering reptilian creatures with thick, armored hides and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered dozens of worlds, wiped out civilizations, and crushed every enemy they had ever faced. But this human, he was something else. He should have died long ago. No creature, no matter how strong, could survive what he had been through. His armor was shattered, his skin torn, and his wounds were deep. Yet he stood tall, his breathing steady, his eyes burning with something they could not understand. How is he still alive? One of the Exoloth commanders whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. No one answered. They had no explanation. They had seen their plasma rounds rip through his body, their blades slice through his flesh. They had watched him fall, only for him to rise again, each time laughing, each time more terrifying than before. The Exoloth general stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human. He had seen enough. This needed to end. Raising his plasma rifle, he aimed directly at the human's head. There would be no more games. No more second chances. One precise shot. But as he placed his finger on the trigger, the human chuckled. Not a nervous laugh. Not a laugh of madness. A laugh filled with amusement, as if he found all of this entertaining. Go ahead, the human said, his voice calm, almost inviting. Try again. Something inside the general hesitated. His instincts screamed at him, don't do it. But why? He had killed millions before. This was just another enemy. Just another kill. Yet, his claws trembled on the trigger. Something was wrong. But he pushed the doubt aside and fired. The plasma bolt struck the human's forehead. The force of the shot sent him crashing to the ground, his body motionless. Smoke rose from his skull, the smell of burnt flesh filling the air. Silence. A moment passed. Then another. The Exoloth soldiers slowly exhaled. It was over. Finally, it was over. Then the laughter returned. Low at first. A soft chuckle. Then louder. The kind of laugh that made the skin crawl. The human's body twitched. His fingers curled. His head lifted, and his burned flesh began to heal before their very eyes. His bones snapped back into place. The hole in his skull vanished, as if it had never been there. He wiped the blood from his face, looked at his hand, then grinned. That one actually hurt, he said, stretching his neck. You're getting better. Panic spread through the Exoloth ranks. Soldiers took a step back. The general's eyes widened in disbelief. This was impossible. No creature could heal like that. No creature could survive a direct plasma shot to the brain. This wasn't just a warrior. This wasn't just a human. This was something beyond their understanding. Something that should not exist. The human took a step forward, and the Exoloth army stepped back in unison. Fear radiated from them. The general clenched his jaw, trying to hold on to his authority, but he could feel it slipping. His soldiers were terrified. And worse, so was he. What are you? He finally asked. The human tilted his head, as if considering the question. Then, he smirked. The last mistake you'll ever make. Before the general could react, the human moved. Too fast. Faster than any Exoloth had ever seen. One moment, he was standing still, the next, he was inside their ranks. The first Exoloth soldier didn't even have time to scream before the human's fist caved in his skull. The second barely had time to lift his weapon before his throat was crushed. Chaos erupted. The Exoloth fired in every direction, but the human was a blur, weaving through them with terrifying speed. Bullets tore through his flesh, but he didn't stop. Plasma bolts burned his skin, but he kept moving. And with each attack, he only became faster. The battlefield turned into a massacre. The Exolith army, the mightiest in the galaxy, was being torn apart by a single man. The general watched in horror as his soldiers fell one by one, their bodies broken, their screams echoing into the night. He had led countless battles, fought in countless wars, but he had never seen anything like this. This was not war. This was a slaughter. And the human he was laughing. Blood dripped from his hands, his body covered in wounds that healed as quickly as they appeared. He had lost count of how many he had killed. It didn't matter. They had called humanity weak. They had thought Earth was an easy target. They had come to conquer. Now they were running. The general turned, trying to escape, but before he could take another step, the human grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Please," the general gasped, his arrogance shattered, his fear raw and real. What do you want?" The human leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to go back to your empire," he said, his grip tightening. "And I want you to tell them what happened here today." He pulled the general closer, his eyes burning with something ancient and terrifying. "Tell them humans are not prey. Tell them what happens when you try to make us your enemy. And tell them—" His grip tightened one last time before he let go, dropping the general to the ground like a broken doll. "Next time, we won't let any of you leave alive." The general didn't wait. He didn't look back. He ran. And behind him, the human stood in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, smiling. The K-Thari warlords had won. Valtrex 9, the last human colony in the sector, was gone. Its cities burned, its defenses shattered, and every last human had been wiped out. The battlefield was silent, filled only with the crackling of flames and the distant hum of K-Thari warships patrolling the skies. Victory was complete. Or at least, that's what they thought. Commander Exilvar stood on the ruins of what was once the human capital. He watched as his soldiers moved through the wreckage, scavenging whatever technology they could find. It had been an easy battle, too easy. The humans had fought, yes, but they had fallen quickly, their weapons no match for K-Thari energy cannons. The entire colony had been exterminated within a single day. There was no resistance left, no survivors. Yet, something felt wrong. The first sign of trouble came when the main communications hub went silent. It was supposed to be a routine report from one of the scouting teams, but no one responded. Silvar sent a second team to investigate. Minutes later, their comms also went dead. No distress signal, no sign of a struggle, just silence. The commander's mandibles clicked in frustration. Perhaps a malfunction? But K-Thari technology did not fail so easily. He activated his visor's night vision and switched to thermal scans. That's when he noticed something odd: heat signatures, human heat signatures. Impossible. The scans before the battle had been clear. The humans were dead. Every last one of them had been eliminated. And yet, the readings flickered, moving too fast for any normal soldier. His grip tightened around his plasma rifle as a chill spread through his body. Something was here. Something that shouldn't be. The first scream tore through the comms like a blade through flesh. A soldier's panicked voice erupted over the channel. "They're here." They static. Then nothing. Zilvar turned, his eyes scanning the ruins. His warriors were the deadliest in the galaxy, trained to kill without hesitation. Yet now they were afraid. He could smell it in the air, the sharp scent of fear, the way they gripped their weapons tighter, their bodies tense. And then, through the smoke and shadows, he saw it. A figure stood in the distance, barely visible through the flickering flames. It was human-shaped, but its movements were unnatural, gliding rather than walking, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Its head tilted slightly, as if watching them, studying them. Then it laughed. A low, eerie sound that sent shivers through every K-Thari present. It was impossible. No human should be alive. No human should be here. Zilvar aimed his rifle and fired. The plasma bolt struck the figure square in the chest, but it didn't fall. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the ruins. More shadows appeared. More figures. Moving too fast, dodging between broken buildings and shattered walls. The Cathari opened fire, their energy blasts illuminating the night, but no bodies fell. No screams of pain. Just shadows moving, surrounding them. Then the killings began. One by one, the Cathari soldiers disappeared. Some were dragged into the darkness before they could even scream. Others were left behind, their throats slit, their bodies torn apart with unnatural strength. Panic spread like wildfire. Warriors who had conquered worlds were now fleeing, desperate to escape whatever unseen force was hunting them. Zilvar shouted orders, demanding his soldiers hold their ground, but it was useless. The terror was too great. And then the whispers started. "You killed us all. You burned our home. You thought we were weak." The voices came from everywhere and nowhere. They weren't just sounds, they were inside the Cathari's minds, filling their thoughts with unbearable dread. Silvar clenched his head, trying to block them out, but they grew louder, more insistent. Then he saw them, faces, half-burned, eyes filled with an unnatural glow, emerging from the shadows. Not human. Not anymore. A soldier ran past him, screaming, trying to reach the evacuation zone. He didn't make it. A shadow moved, faster than the eye could follow, and the soldier's body twisted unnaturally before collapsing into the dirt. Silvar stumbled backward. His army was gone. His warships were shutting down, their systems failing one by one. The ghosts had taken everything. The commander turned to flee, his heart pounding in his chest, but the moment he moved, he felt a cold hand gripping his shoulder. He froze. Slowly, he turned his head, and there it was. A human. Or at least, what used to be one. Its flesh was torn, its body barely holding itself together, yet it was standing, grinning, its eyes glowing with something not of this world. "You thought we were dead?" the thing whispered, its voice chilling, empty. "We are." Zilvar didn't even have time to scream before everything went black. Why sunrise? The Cathari warships were gone, their wreckage scattered across the wasteland. The bodies of the alien soldiers lay motionless, their expressions twisted in pure terror. The ghosts of Valtrex 9 had taken their revenge. And as the wind howled through the ruins, a single sound remained, a low, eerie laughter that never truly faded. The Vroth Dominion had surrounded Earth. Their warships darkened the sky, their cannons aimed at the last human stronghold. This was not just an invasion, it was the final step in the destruction of humanity. The Vroth had crushed dozens of human colonies, wiped out fleets, and torn through their defenses like they were nothing. Now Earth itself stood alone, its fate sealed. Surrender was inevitable. The human forces were weak, outnumbered, and had no way to escape. And yet, as Supreme Commander Valak stood before the captured human general, something felt wrong. The man sitting across from him, General Ethan Graves, was smiling. It was not the nervous smile of a man who knew he was about to die. Nor was it the desperate grin of someone clinging to false hope. No, this was something else. Something colder. Something dangerous. Valak had fought many wars. He'd seen the fear in his enemies' eyes before they fell. He had seen kings and admirals beg for mercy, trembling before the might of the Dominion. But this man? He was calm. Too calm. And that smile, it sent a chill through the alien commander's spine. "You do realize this is the end, don't you?" Valak said, narrowing his reptilian eyes. His deep, gravelly voice echoed in the steel-walled interrogation chamber. "Your planet is surrounded. Your armies are broken. Your people have no chance." He leaned forward, expecting to see the first signs of fear. But General Graves only tilted his head, his smile widening slightly. "Is that what you think?" the human asked, his voice smooth, almost amused. A look frowned. He had expected threats, insults, maybe even a desperate plea for peace. Instead, the human sat there like a man who had already won. It was unsettling. The Vroth were superior in every way, stronger, faster, more advanced. They had destroyed human fleets without breaking a sweat. And yet, something about this man's expression made Valak hesitate. "You are playing games," the commander growled, clenching his fist. "We have scanned your planet. We have detected no hidden fleets, no secret weapons. You have lost." Graves exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "You're right about one thing, Commander," he said. "You've scanned the planet. But did you scan behind you?" A ripple of confusion passed over Valak's face. He turned slightly, signaling his officer to run a scan of the sector. It was a pointless task. There was nothing there. The Dominion had locked down the entire system. Every possible escape route had been sealed. There was nowhere for the humans to run, and certainly no way for reinforcements to arrive. The officer hesitated, eyes wide as he stared at the console. "Supreme Commander," he stammered. Valak's chest tightened. Something was wrong. "What is it?" he demanded. The officer swallowed hard. "We're detecting ships. Thousands of them." He looked up, his face pale. "Right behind us." Before Valak could respond, the alarms blared. A red glow filled the room as emergency sirens echoed through the Vroth warship. The commander's comms flared to life with panicked voices from his fleet. They came out of nowhere. "Impossible! We scanned the entire system. They're attacking." Shields failing. The bridge doors burst open, and an officer ran inside, his face twisted with fear. "Sir? Human warships, they've surrounded us." Valak's blood turned cold. That was not possible. Humanity had no remaining fleets. The last of their major warships had been destroyed in the battle for Mars. There was no way they could have gathered an armada of this scale. Yet, as he pulled up the tactical display, his worst nightmare unfolded before him. Massive human warships had decloaked behind the Dominion fleet. Sleek, black vessels, built for destruction. Weapons already primed. Engines burning like dying stars. These were not the fragile, outdated ships the Vroth had been used to fighting. These were something else. Something new. And then, the first volley fired. Blue beams of energy cut through the Dominion warships like paper, explosions rippling across their fleet. Valak watched in horror as entire battleships disintegrated in seconds. Human vessels moved like ghosts, weaving through the chaos with unnatural precision. They had been waiting, watching, hiding just beyond the Dominion sensors until the perfect moment. And now, the trap had closed. The fleet that was supposed to wipe out Earth was being wiped out. Instead, Valak turned back to General Graves, who was still seated, still calm, still smiling. "You see, Commander," Graves said, leaning forward slightly, "you were never the hunters. You were the prey." His voice was smooth, steady, deadly. "We knew you'd come for Earth. We let you think you had us cornered. We let you believe we were weak. But the truth?" He chuckled. "We've been preparing for this war far longer than you can imagine. And now?" His eyes gleamed with something cold and merciless. "Now, it's your turn to run." Valak clenched his fists, rage and terror warring inside him. The Vroth never ran. They were conquerors, the rulers of the stars. They did not lose. But as another explosion rocked the ship, as reports came in of more Dominion vessels being destroyed, as the terrifying realization set in that this battle was already lost, Valak finally understood the meaning of that damnable human smile. It was not the smile of a man who had lost. It was the smile of a man who had already won. The Zelkiri Empire had never feared humans. To them, humanity was nothing more than another weak species to be conquered. The war had been swift, brutal, and completely one-sided. Earth had fallen within weeks, its cities reduced to ash, its military crushed under the might of Zalkiri war machines. Billions had died, and those who survived were enslaved, forced to serve their new alien overlords. The resistance had been wiped out. Humanity was extinct. Or so the Zalkiri believed. High Commander Vorthis stood on the command deck of his battlecruiser, staring down at the ruins of Earth. The planet was nothing but a wasteland now, stripped of its resources and its people. It was dead. And yet, something felt wrong. Reports had surfaced whispers of something moving in the shadows, of Zalkiri patrols disappearing without a trace, of soldiers who went out on routine missions and were never seen again. At first, Vorthis dismissed it as paranoia. The humans were finished. There was no one left to fight. But then the footage arrived. A security drone had captured something grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. A Zalkiri patrol had been ambushed by something fast. Shadows moved through the ruins with inhuman speed. The Zalkiri soldiers opened fire, their plasma rifles cutting through the darkness, but it was useless. The attackers were too fast, too precise, too deadly. One by one, the soldiers fell, screaming, until only silence remained. And then, for just a moment, the camera caught a glimpse of a figure. Not a Zalkiri. Not a machine. A human. Vorthis froze as he watched the footage again. Impossible. The last human resistance had been exterminated months ago. No survivors remained. And yet, this thing moved like a ghost, killing with brutal efficiency. There was no hesitation, no fear. Just precision. Who is this? Vorthis demanded, his voice sharp. His intelligence officer hesitated before responding. We believe it is connected to an old human military project, sir. A classified experiment known as Project Revenant. Vorthis narrowed his eyes. Explain. The officer gulped. It was an advanced super-soldier program. The humans were developing a new breed of warriors enhanced beyond anything we've ever seen. But they never finished the project before we invaded. The files suggest they weren't creating normal soldiers. They were making something else. Something designed for revenge. A chill spread through the command deck. The Zalkiri had faced many enemies before, but this was different. This was something unnatural. Then the alarms blared. INTRUDERALERT. Intruder alert on Deck 7. Vorthis turned sharply. Impossible. This was the most secure vessel in the fleet. No human could have boarded it. And yet, as the screens flickered, he saw the impossible happening in real time. A single figure moved through the hallways, cutting down Zalkiri guards like they were nothing. The security systems failed to track it properly. It moved too fast, its body shifting in and out of sight. It wasn't just human anymore. It was something more. Something reborn. Vorthis grabbed his weapon and activated the ship-wide comms. All units, converge on Deck 7. Kill the intruder! But even as he spoke, deep down, he knew the truth.it was already too late. The lights flickered. The power failed. The ship shuddered as something cut through its systems like a knife through flesh. The Zalkiri soldiers stood frozen, gripping their weapons tightly, their breathing ragged. Then the whispers began. You took everything from us. The voice came from everywhere. It wasn't just one person. It was many. You burned our world. A scream echoed through the halls as another Zalkiri was dragged into the shadows, his death silent and swift. You thought we were weak. The power came back on for a brief second, just long enough for Vorthis to see them. They weren't just one. There were dozens. Humans, but not humans. Their eyes glowed, their movements unnatural, their bodies enhanced beyond recognition. Project Revenant had worked. Humanity had not died. It had been reborn as something else. Something that could not be stopped. Vorthis raised his weapon, but it was useless. The shadows moved and then everything went dark. The Dravki warlords had conquered 1,000 worlds, crushed countless species beneath their boots, and bathed entire planets in fire. They had fought the most savage warriors in the galaxy and emerged victorious every time. But today, on the battlefield of Vecker Prime, something was wrong. The humans were supposed to break. They were supposed to run. They were supposed to fear the might of the Dravki. And yet, they were laughing. Commander Exaroth stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching the impossible unfold. The human forces were outnumbered 10 to 1. Their weapons were weaker, their armor was lighter, and their ships were nothing compared to the brutal war machines of the Dravki. By all logic, this battle should have been over hours ago. And yet, the humans were still fighting. Worse than that, they were enjoying it. A group of human soldiers charged into the fray, their guns blazing, their blades flashing as they tore through the Dravki ranks. They should have been terrified. They should have been overwhelmed. But instead, they were grinning. Their eyes burned with something strange, something unnatural excitement. One human, covered in blood, let out a wild laugh as he plunged his blade into a Dravki warrior's throat. Another, missing an arm, still fought with relentless fury, using his other hand to tear into his enemies. They didn't care about pain. They didn't care about death. They only cared about the fight. Sirath felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. This was not how war was supposed to go. Battles were about dominance, about crushing the enemy's will, about making them fear their inevitable defeat. But these humans, they were thriving. He had never seen anything like it. They fought as if the war was a game, as if every moment of violence brought them some twisted form of joy. They didn't fear war. They loved it. A Dravki warrior stumbled back, his chest heaving, his armor cracked. He was one of the best fighters in the Legion, a veteran of 100 battles. But now, he looked shaken, his grip on his blade unsteady. A human soldier stood before him, grinning through bloodied teeth. "Getting tired already?" The human taunted, rolling his shoulders. "Come on, don't quit now. We're just getting started." The Dravki snarled and swung his blade, but the human was faster. He ducked, sidestepped, and struck with brutal precision, driving a knife into the alien's ribs. The Dravki fell to his knees, gasping in pain. The human leaned in, his grin widening. "Man, I love this," he said, almost giddy. Then, without hesitation, he finished the job. Sirath clenched his fists. This was wrong. He had seen warriors fight for survival. He had seen them fight for their people, their homes, their honor. But he had never seen a species that enjoyed the fight itself. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting because they wanted to, because they loved it. And that made them unstoppable. A deep roar echoed across the battlefield, and Exaroth turned to see a massive human, clad in heavy armor, standing atop a pile of Dravki corpses. He held a severed Dravki warlord's head in one hand, raising it high as his fellow humans cheered. His voice boomed across the field. "ISTH-TALLYOUGOT?" The Dravki forces hesitated. It was a small hesitation, barely noticeable, but Sirath saw it. Fear. For the first time in the history of the Dravki, they were feeling fear. And the humans? They saw it too. And they laughed. Sirath's blood ran cold. This battle was lost. Not because the humans had better weapons, not because they had more soldiers, but because they were something far more terrifying than any enemy he had ever faced. They didn't fear the war. They craved it. And as the human forces surged forward with grins on their bloodied faces, Sirath realized the most horrifying truth of all. The humans were just getting started.